Before COVID, he burnt the boats and built his Airbnb business up to 180 units. Then COVID hit, and guess what? He almost doubled after that to almost 300 units. Syed Lateef is going to share that entire story here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, Team Fearless, I just want to take a quick break from this podcast to talk about funding your furnishings. If you're listening to the Fearless Investor Podcast, then you probably want to do the Airbnb arbitrage model. Reason being, it's a low barrier of entry, right? $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to buy furniture with someone else's property. And sure, you can use your own bank account or you can raise the money at a low interest rate from a friend or family member. But wouldn't you rather get that money at 0% interest, aka free money? That's what my friends at Pathway Financial can do for you. Pathway Financial helps people like you get 0% interest credit cards so you don't have to have the financial stress of putting down a ton of money up front for your deals. Think about that for a second. How many arbitrage deals could you do if money was not a concern? Well, that could be the exact possibility with Pathway Financial's help. Get a free quote from them today. Go to fearlesskyle.com/pathway financial to find out how much you can get pre-approved for right now. And don't worry, it won't have any impact on your credit score because it's a soft inquiry. So go once again to fearlesskyle.com/pathway financial and get that free quote. Hey, welcome in Team Fearless. It's Kyle Stanley here coming at you on the Fearless Investor Podcast. And this is a really amazing story. Syed Lateef, after having a conversation with him, just a very humble guy, a hard worker. And as you'll see and hear during this conversation with him, there was really no luck. He'll talk about luck for a little bit, but really there's no luck when it comes to the success that this guy had. He's willing to do all the things that most unsuccessful people are not willing to do. And for that reason, if you're wondering like, why am I not getting results? And I keep getting no's, or I keep hitting all these, roadblocks, just ask yourself, like, am I really doing all the things necessary to be successful? Because you're going to hear about a guy today who just grinds and just finds solutions no matter what the situation is. And that is why he's been so successful so far in his short-term rental career. So let's get to it right now with Syed Lateef here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey guys, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. And if you're listening here live in the Six Figure Formula community, welcome in 6FFers. And if you're not, if you're listening in on recording, well, hey, welcome in Team Fearless, because we have got a really cool conversation that we're going to have with one of the top hosts, I would say, in our industry. And, I'm always, Syed, like, you reached out to me, but I'm always like, is this person for real, right? Because there's a lot of fakers out there. And so I went and talked to a couple friends in the industry who knew you, and they're like, he's legit and he's big and he's doing huge things. So I'm just really excited to have you on here today. So thanks for joining us, Syed Lateef.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being on here. I haven't done a podcast in a few years. I kind of stayed off the grid for a long time, put my head down and was working. So I'm looking to get back in the zone, and hopefully I don't choke up too much, but I'm looking forward to being on here.
I don't plan on making you nervous, so I think we're going to be good. This is going to be a fun conversation. And you have been hard at work. We were just kind of talking right before we got started here, and the story is amazing. I can't wait for people to hear it. But I would like to start off with our icebreaker. What is the craziest short-term rental story that you've got for our audience?
So I'm going to tell you a story that happened maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm in this luxury A-class building that is around 350 units in a suburb. Brand new development, super nice, $100 million development, pools, gyms, and everything. I had 25 short-term rentals in that building. There was a big storm 2 weeks ago, and a lightning strike hit the roof of one of the buildings.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so when that happened, there was a fire in the building, but the fire was in like the attic. So they didn't know that the fire was like spreading across the whole entire like building.
Oh no.
So what had happened is one of the wings of the building ended up having significant fire. They had to evacuate all 300 tenants in the building, including my 25 short-term rentals. And everybody in the building was displaced. Like my guess, I had to get them hotels for that night. But when they were allowing people back in the building, my wing did not get affected, but my units became of value to the landlord. He wanted to place his tenants he wanted to place his tenants that were in the other wing into my, into my units. And I'm like, well, wait, this is my busy season. I want my people to come back in. I have guests there. And then he went off and said, I don't care who you have in there. I don't care about your business. I'm going to lock your doors and I'll put your furniture in the garage. And
No.
you could sue me, and let's see what the judge says. And then after conversation, we settled on a dollar amount, and I gave him all my furniture, all the units back, and we called it a day.
I hope you came out okay on top of that.
So yes and no. I was month to month on the lease, so he could have just told me to leave right the next 30 days, but he needed it today. So I basically got that month of August net income up front to allow me to be okay. And that furniture was like 3 years old now, and it was kind of beat up, and it was kind of like a burden to me to like have to think about having to warehouse it and stuff.
Right.
It was actually furniture from like estate Alfred bankruptcy that I acquired a lot of furniture from. And some of the sofas were like 600 pounds. So I was like kind of dreading to having to remove all that stuff from like the units. So I ended up being, not like a win, but not like the biggest loss. It ended up being okay. I could take some money and move on.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
now though, when you got 25 that you're losing, I guess that's what, less than 10% of your portfolio. So why don't you just tell people really quickly, like what your portfolio looks like? Especially, are they arbitrage? Are they coast? Are they owned? Just give a little bit of an overview if you can.
So yeah, on my Instagram, I say the only 8-figure Airbnb host on Instagram, and I have 300 units plus. But after this incident, I'm gonna have to change up how many like total units I have. I did a countdown. Yeah, there you go. I could change that to approaching. So after the reduction of these 25 units, I have 295. So I have maybe give me like 2 more weeks, and I'll go back to the 300 units.
There you go. Are arbitrage, or do you own any of them?
So maybe 98% of it is arbitrage. I own 12 units, so 3 buildings. Each have like 3 to 5 units in each, but majority of my business is arbitrage. I was looking to buy a lot more last year because I had the capital to do so. But with like the interest rates increasing and the prices of real estate going up at the same time, I started trying to time the market, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's not a good opportunity for me to do that at the moment.
So, the 300 units, there's a story behind that, and we're going to get to that here in a second. But I guess what I would like to know is, are they all in Chicago? That's where you're based out of, or are they in different markets? Where are they all located?
So I'm in few cities, but majority of my business is based out of Chicago.
Okay, awesome. So let's go back right before COVID, before even you got into short-term rentals. How did you get in to this space, and what was like the moment where you were like, oh my gosh, I can blow this thing up? Because 300 units, man, that's nothing to shy away from.
Yeah, so my background is finance. I went to college, got a finance degree, got a job in corporate America. I was doing forecasting and budgeting at a big insurance company. It was Allstate Insurance. So I was doing that for 5 years, but I wanted more, and I wanted to figure out how I could get passive income to replace my, current active income at my job. So I started researching, and I fell into Bigger Pockets, and I was like obsessed with forums and like the podcasts on there, and everybody was talking about house hacking. So I'm like, okay, I could do this. I could figure this out. So I started ending up purchasing my first multifamily property in 2017. And that's when I did like the FHA financing, where you have to live in one of the units.
Yeah.
It was like a $500,000 property. I got into it for like nothing. Like, I took a loan out of my 401k, $25,000 is all I needed.
Wow.
And I was able to buy the property. I lived in one of the units for a year. And after the year was over, I listened to another podcast on Bigger Pockets, how this guy was killing it on Airbnb. So I'm like, okay, I have it already furnished. Like, let me try putting it on Airbnb and seeing what happens. When I first put it on, it made like double rent. So I was like, whoa, this is like crazy. Like, what happens? Like, I'm in a very seasonal market. So I'm like, let's see what happens when you get closer to the spring and summer. And like 2 months later, I ended up making 3 times the amount of rent that I was supposed to make. And that's like when the light bulb went off, and I was like, hey, can I do this to the other units in my building? And if I do that, will I also get the same results? So it was almost like every single unit I put on during the summertime, I was getting 3x rent. So
Wow.
I was like, okay, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. I need to leave my job and like go all in on this like full time.
Mm. So you just burned the boats after a few, and you were like, okay, I like, were you making enough to offset what your main job was, or were you just banking on the fact that you were going to blow this thing up?
So I did some math. I did some math, and I lived with not too crazy amount of expenses. You know, I was renting an apartment for 1450 a month. I had a paid off car, and my wife and my kids, like, they were my wife worked at the time, you know, and she was making some income. So the amount of money I was making did offset my, you know, salary job. And but I just got this itch. I was like, I saw an opportunity, and I said I could figure it out. So what I did is like 2 months, 3 months into doing Airbnb in this building, I went to my manager and I was like, hey, you know, I'm giving you like a month's notice, 6 weeks notice. Let me know what like what we have to do. And then like after like 2 to 4 weeks later, she came and asked, can you work part time? And you can, you know, you could keep your health insurance. So I did that for like, you know, another 5 more months, and that's finally
Okay.
it was December. It was December 31st, and January 1st is when I ended up like going full time all in 2018 in short term rentals.
So I'm calling out a couple people in my uh, community right now. I just tagged them in this because we literally just had this conversation in Cabo
Yeah,
about burning the boats, right? And just going for it, and all the fears that come along with it, and the safety, right? Like, hey, the health insurance, and hey, the being able to pay for kids' school, and what if I go in and I don't get the results I'm looking for them, and I wish I had kept that job. What did you see as soon as you burned those boats and you went all in? What did
yeah.
you see as results? Like and essentially what changed in your mindset too that got the results that you're about to share?
So I'm a big proponent on, for me, I could figure anything out. So I bet on myself every day of the week. You know, there's not a time where, if this doesn't work out, then I'll figure out how to get back a job. Like my degree didn't go away, my job experience didn't go away, me as a person didn't go away. So if it all failed and I have to feed my family, I would just go back and get the job. I
Yeah.
wasn't worried about that. But I didn't even think of that. If that's the case, I said this is gonna work. You know, I was gonna make it happen. So that was my mindset on it.
So you were betting on yourself, and you knew no
Betting on
matter
myself,
what,
yes.
even if you didn't get that job back, I'm assuming the skills that you had would lead you to a different job.
Yeah, like, you know, job market was good. I was in finance. Like I had no concern of that. And like, to be honest, after quitting, I didn't even think of going back. You know, if it comes to a point where even if this fails, which it could, you know, things are good now, but tomorrow it cannot be good. I will never do a corporate job ever in my life again.
Mhm.
I will figure out some other way to make money, and that's kind of my mindset now. I'll never work for somebody else again.
So I want you to speak to our audience here, Team Fearless, for a second, and just think back to when you made that decision. What were some of the qualifiers for you of things that you needed to have? Was there a certain amount of money in the bank that you needed to have to make sure, like, hey, even if this goes awry, I've got X amount of months of savings? Was there any sort of like, hey, I needed a certain amount of cash flow to make that decision? Were there any pre-qualifiers, or were you just literally like, no, this is just the opportunity of a lifetime?
Yeah, so of course, before making a decision, I thought of like, okay, do I have some reserves in my bank? And I did. I had some savings. I had maybe like 25,000, $30,000 of savings. Plus, I had another $25,000 in my 401k that I even took out.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, so this $50,000 of cushion is good. And then the income that I was making from the short-term rentals at the time, I was in my busy season, so I thought this is it. You know, like, I'm already making more on a monthly basis than I did at my job with these, like, you know, 4 or 5 units. So
Nice.
having the cushion and having the replaced income allowed me to, okay, I could go all in. So, and then again, my wife had that secondary income, and again, like, if worst comes to worst, you know, I could just get that job back. You know, I had 6 months of leeway to like go to make sure, like, if I can't get a job in 6 months, there's something wrong with me. You know, I was thinking like I would start Ubering or something like that. I would have done something to make money. You know.
Awesome. Okay. So you quit your job, you go full time. What happened from there? And is this still 2017 or what year are we in now?
2018 is when
Okay. So
I January.
2018, you
It's
quit your
like
job.
basically after like, yeah.
Yeah. So take me from 2018 up until COVID. What did that look like for results?
Yeah. So if I go on a tangent and you to break me up, let me know. But so initially, I noticed in my market that there was no other property management company that did Airbnb besides this one company. And I was like, okay, so there's room for competition. They can't just take the entire market share. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, let me make a Airbnb management company where I go to owners that already have furnished units or they're already on Airbnb, and let's take an 80-20 split. And that's what I started marketing. I created a website, and I invested in some SEO, like not even that much money, but that boosted me up to like number one on Google,
Nice.
and which was like amazing because there's not a lot of competition for Airbnb management in Chicago. So I even was like above them. So I would get all these leads coming in, and I was like, well, like this is like amazing. So I ended up closing all these deals with all these different people, and I started doing their work for them. And after like 3, 4, 5 months, I realized like, whoa, this is not for me. Like I cannot deal with like these emotional people
Yeah. Yeah.
in
The
these homes.
owners.
They
Yeah.
took yeah, they took a lot out of me, and they were complaining about like the minor things and not worried about like the actual dollars coming in, because I still was making their like 2x rent, for their unit after my fees. So they were worried about like, hey, why is this like $30 painting broken and stuff? And like, okay, big deal, I'll replace it. But it takes a toll on you for the amount of complaints.
Sure.
They message you like you're their assistant, like, hey, do this for me, do that for me. So after one big bad relationship I had with this one person, I was like, they used like 3 months of my time. Like, they made me on board like 20 units for like 3 months, and I did everything for them. And then all of a sudden, after 1 month, they like cut me off, and I was like, well, like, hey, I can't do that again. Fortunately, then I went to this one random networking event, and at this networking event, one person in my little circle of group was like, "Hey, we're looking for people to do Airbnb in our properties." And I was like, "Wait, what the heck?" I never even heard like anybody even asking that. I'm like, "Okay, who do you work with? Like, do you own the buildings and stuff?" She was like, "Well, I work with this one big landlord. He has 1,000 units at the time, and they're trying to visit Airbnb in their buildings." I'm like, okay, me, like, I would love to do that. She's like, okay, give me your information, and let's reach out. So it was me reaching out to them for like 6 months. Like I was like begging them, like every other like week, I would like, hey, what's going on? Can we do Airbnb in your property? And um, I was only at the level of the property manager of the building, and then finally it came. He was just pushing me off. And then finally, like I started stepping into the office. I'm like, hey, can we do something? And then he was like fed up with me. So he's like, let me just have you have a meeting with the boss.
Okay.
So I had my meeting with the boss, and he was just like a big alpha. Like I didn't even say a word. And he just said all these things like why it's not a good idea, and why he does not want to get in the furniture business. He doesn't want to buy furniture. It's going to be a distraction. Tenants are going to complain, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, let me just rent 2 of the units, and I'll pay you rent, and allow me to run the business on myself. And it doesn't matter how much money I make, I'll just pay you the rent. And this was like rental arbitrage before like rental arbitrage existed. Like there was
Yeah.
not a term for this, right? So he ended up saying, as long as you pay the rent and don't cause me issues, let's go, let's do it. So
Wow.
after 6 months of persistence and finally getting that meeting with the guy, I got 2 units. After I furnished those 2 units, I started putting on Airbnb. It was like, 1 month, 2 months later, I was like, hey, I paid the second rent, third rent. Do you have more units I can have? And mind you, he had like 1,000 units at the time.
Wow.
So he has vacancy, he has 100, 200 units vacant at a time. And then he said, yeah, sure, you're doing good. Take these other 2 units. I took those 2 units. 2 months later, I'm like, can I have more? And he's like, take these 5 units. And then I kept coming to him, and then take these 15 units.
Was it all in
I
the same
kept showing
building?
him. No, they're all in different buildings. He had many different buildings all over the city. And then finally, I kept on adding units with him, and the 2 units became 35 units.
Wow. All from one landlord.
All from one landlord. Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so
So
you
yeah,
get
yeah.
35, and then what happened?
So after doing like leases, like from like the standard lease, it ended up being like handshake deals, and it was weird. After like 35 units, after I was stabilized, maybe like 20 of my units were like no lease, nothing, and I was just paying the
Oh my
rent.
God.
So then it came to a point where I was getting into my slow season, and I didn't know the landlord's intention. Like he was not telling me like, okay, we're doing good, let's keep on adding or what. And I started thinking like, hey, I'm gonna take some huge losses right now, and then I'm gonna go into my like busy season. But what if he ends up telling me to leave after like my slow season?
Sure.
So basically during when that happened, I was like, okay, like, whoa, I can't put all my eggs in one basket. I need to start reaching out to other people
Yeah.
to get some short-term rentals. Well, because this guy had a great reputation in the city, everybody knew him. He was a big player. It was easy for me to go to his colleagues and other colleagues and competitors, and be like, "Hey, I'm doing Airbnb with him. Can I do it with you?" And it took me 6 months to do my first pitch, but my next pitches were a lot shorter, because now I had a reputation. Now I was confident to be able to talk to them. So again, after many say no, all you need is one to say yes.
Absolutely.
So, and then I ended up working with another guy. Starts off with one, and with that one guy, right now at the moment, I have 180 units with him. So,
Wow. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
with just one landlord. Yeah,
So I guess before I ask that question. All right. So
yeah,
you find a few more landlords. You get up to right around 180 units right before COVID. Talk
right.
about what happened during COVID, and just all the struggles that you went through during that time.
Yeah, but I'll give you like a quick story on how it led up to like 180. So, uh, it was like January 2020,
Mhm.
and this is like my slow season. I'm losing a lot of money, but I'm taking on a lot of debt at the moment because landlords had vacancy issues in their buildings, so they were motivated to do business,
Okay.
and I wanted to grow. And I was like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to just ride this winter. Sorry, just ride this winter, and all I need to get to is like the March spring season, and I'll be okay. So landlords were motivated to allow me to get into units. So I took on a lot of debt. I took on like $300,000-400,000 worth of debt, borrowing from a family member, and then racking up credit cards. Like I opened like 10 credit cards in like a month, and
Nice.
um, and then in addition to like that $400,000-500,000 of debt, I had losses every month in like December, January, February. So
Because of slow
uh,
season.
because of slow season. But the landlords were allowing me to add units, so it was a good time. And I'm like, okay, March is coming. This is like exciting. I'm back in my busy season now. I have 180 units. I'll figure out how to pay my credit card debt. I'll figure out how to do all this. We'll be all good. But then I think it was like the start of spring break, and all of a sudden, like COVID happens, travel bans,
Yeah.
no flights, and it like literally hit me with like a brick wall, and it was almost like a knockout punch that didn't even allow me to like even like feel like, oh, this is done. Like I wasn't even like upset about it. I'm like, it just like it knocked me out so hard, so fast. Couldn't even think about like what was going on,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So all of a sudden I had to go to all my 10 landlords at the time and tell them, listen, I have no more cash in my bank account. I have like a $500,000 rent that's due.
Wow.
How do you want to proceed with what we have going on? Like, I'll give you three options. You let me know what you want, right? And option number one was allow me to leave the units, like just terminate my lease, pick up my stuff, and leave. Or number two is let's get on like a revenue share and figure out
Mm.
how we could get through like COVID. And number three was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to pay you, so you could sue me, and you could figure out how you could make money off like my assets or whatever, and go from there.
I like that you gave them that option. You could sue me.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was people that said, yes, I'm going to sue you until you have nothing, you know.
Oh my
So like
gosh.
landlords in my market are ruthless. You know, they've been in the game
Mm,
for so long. There were comments from them saying like, okay, like listen, we're not COVID charity. You know, I don't care what's going on. And at the time, nobody knew what COVID was. Like our industry got hit fastest and first. So
yep.
they didn't even realize like the impact of what COVID was going to be for them and like how serious it was, right? I just came to him the day that it was like the no flights going on. I was in my like professional mastermind group, you could call it, and I was feeling them out, seeing what everybody else was saying, and a lot of people were saying this is going to be bad for all of us. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so let me go to my landlords, and I was literally walking into their offices and telling them like, here's the situation, and they were like shocked by that. They're like, in all my years, I've never had somebody come in my office without unannounced telling me that, hey, I'm not paying you guys anymore. You know, I'm not going to be able to afford the rent anymore. But there was some good feedback, but some not so good feedback. But my back was against the wall. I had to do something. So, like, out of the 10 landlords, three of them said, okay, pick up your stuff and leave. Another three were like, okay, we could do a revenue share, which saved my
Yep.
life. But there
Nice.
was like a handful of them said that, like, listen, I'm not letting anything go. You got to pay every single dollar, or we're going to have some problems. I even had one landlord threaten me saying that he was going to shoot me if I don't pay him.
Whoa. Jeez.
Yeah, I know, but like, yeah, it was like, yes, but I actually used that as leverage to come up with a
Yeah.
settlement because I was like,
Heck
hey, you know,
yeah.
hey, I feel threatened, even though I didn't really feel threatened, but I said I felt threatened. I had to get a
I
lawyer
mean, he
involved
said
and
it.
stuff.
He said it. I
Yeah, he said it,
definitely
right?
believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
So yeah,
so
go ahead.
so really, really quick here. I want to interject before you finish that.
Yeah,
$500,000 of essentially rents coming up, and it sounds like you just went into like problem solving mode, and you gave
yeah.
options, which I love. You know, I I cannot believe some of them were giving you the threats that you were, but with with all of that weighing on you, can you remember back to just like how physically and emotionally tolling all of that was on you, and especially your family? You've got kids. Like, what were the
Yeah.
thoughts going through your mind then?
So, like I said, it happened so fast where I couldn't even like reflect on what was going
Mhm.
on. Like I literally went into problem solving mode, but it was a lonely thing I was going through myself. It's not something that I could even go to my wife about and explain to her what was going on. One, I can't get her worried, you know. Number two, it's not like she could understand like what was like the everything that was like gonna happen now going forward. I didn't want to scare her, so you know I didn't end up like talking to anybody about it. So it was like a lonely thing that I had to like figure out myself, you know. And I had these like 10 things that I needed to happen. And if those 10 things happen, then I could still survive and stay in business, you know? And to be honest, like reflecting back now, it's like those 10 things hit with the like perfect, like a home run on every single one of those. And that's the reason why I'm here today and able to like even talk to you right now. Because a lot of my colleagues, even during that time, I've noticed during in our little Facebook group, they phased out. They don't even respond to messages anymore, and they're not even in the business anymore. So, you know, it took a toll on a lot of people, but fortunately, I was able to get out of it. But from a mindset perspective, like, uh, yeah, it just happened way too fast where I couldn't even feel sad about it or upset
You just
about
had
it.
to get in
So, you
action.
know, that's good and bad. Like, it wasn't like a slow sinking ship, you know, to
Yeah.
like, okay, hey, finally I'm losing. Like, I feel like there are other situations that happened to me in my business that took a greater toll on me than what actually COVID did because of how the speed of like what was going
Yeah.
on, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was only at like 7 units when COVID hit, and I just remembered all of the action I had to take for trying to find midterm rentals and everything for those 7
Yeah.
units. I
Oh,
couldn't
yeah.
imagine. Yeah, I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
almost 200 units at the time and what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you had to
So
scale
it
back.
was 90 units. I had to let go of half my portfolio because of like the
Yeah.
settlements and landlords terminating the leases. So I went from 180 to 90. So um, 90 was what I had to figure out how to fill up again with like midterm rentals and other things.
So you were at 90, but now you're at 300. So obviously, like you said, you call it a knockout punch, but it really wasn't. It sounds like you got back in the ring. And can you just talk about
Yeah.
how you were able to go and recover from all that and get back into even just the mindset of saying like, I'm sure there was a ton of times, right, that you were like, okay, am I building this back up to have to go through what I had to go through in March of 2020 again, or was that so far in your rearview mirror?
So what had happened is after like 1 to 2 months, I settled with those 4 landlords that said, "Hey, we're not going to give you any breaks or anything." Finally, they started realizing like the extent of what COVID was going to be to the economy. So a lot of them did settle with me with payments and dollar amounts or whatever. And then the 2 landlords that I had with me, 3 landlords that I had that kept me in business, I had majority of my portfolio with them, and they were nice enough to go on a revenue share with me during that time. And then exactly with those 90 units, I had to figure out how to get them filled. So we basically saw what I had to pay from a long-term rent perspective. And I'm like, listen, I'm just going to price it of what I'm paying for rent and see if I could get long-term stays. So I was focusing on like, I put like minimum stays, like 7 days or 10 days to
Mhm.
not get the craziness that there was going on during that time of people wanting to book, but getting better quality tenants. So um, COVID was not that bad for the Airbnb space after figuring out what happened in like the first couple of weeks.
Yep.
It was
I agree.
actually, we were way better than other type of travel companies. Like hotels suffered so hard. Like
Oh yeah.
Airbnbs were safe, right? Airbnbs were clean. There was not the revolving door of people coming in and out. So people started coming back and staying in my space. There was people that were going through divorce, with fighting with their spouse, with I forgot the name of it, but it was like the workers that had to come work for like um, the need at the time. So there was
Yeah.
still a demand for people coming into the space. So with those 90 units, I was making money and I was paying the landlord. The landlord said, let's try it out for like 1, 2 months. If it's not working out, just give me back the units. And I said, okay. But money was coming in. So they were happy with the situation, what was going on. So now I didn't have that big obligation of rent anymore, and I'm just sharing the revenue. So it was
There you
like
go.
a huge burden off. I settled with all these other landlords. I'm still going to be in business now. I didn't have that stress of like, even I have the stress now of like, I have to pay rent because we kind of switched back into rental arbitrage. But at the time, I wasn't stressed. And then what had happened was there was other companies that were going bankrupt at the time, and some big ones. One of them being Stay Alfred. And Stay Alfred was going through a bankruptcy, and they were liquidating their FF&E, which is like the furniture. So I had a colleague tell me that like, hey, put in an offer. You never know if they're going to accept it or not. And I put some crazy offer in for some of the furniture. Like I think it was like $200 per unit on these like 20 units, and which is like, mind you, $200 when it's like $10,000 to furnish a unit, right? So $200 was nothing. I
Yeah.
thought it was a BS offer. I would not get accepted. I finally started getting responses saying that like, okay, hey, we accept your offer.
Oh my
Can you come pick up
gosh.
the stuff? Yeah. So basically, I started working with like the liquidation attorney for Stay Alfred, and I started going all over the country picking up Stay Alfred furniture at $250 a piece. And it
Wow.
was like I literally had to create a logistics warehousing business overnight. Like I had to Google, like, okay, how do you rent a truck? How do you get a warehouse? How do you find movers? I was literally doing that overnight because it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity for me to get this amount of furniture for so cheap, and it was like decent quality furniture. Stay Alfred just had that furniture in there for like less than a year, right? So. Um, it was like good stuff, and I was like, I have a lot of margin of error to like figure out what like
Heck yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah. So even though I bought it at $200, the amount of labor was like 3x that, 4x that. So I ended up being like $1,000 per unit that was my spend for this to find
Still
movers,
pennies on the
find
dollar though.
trucks. Yeah, pennies on the dollars, 10 cents on the dollar, right? So I took all this furniture. I ended up negotiating in different markets. I ended up getting 150 apartments with the furniture. I had 4 warehouses in Dallas, in Chicago, in like all these different locations, right? And they were offering more and more and more, and I wanted it, but I couldn't figure out like where to keep it. So it's like, I obviously now going back, it's like I wish I bought like more. Like I wish I wasn't like okay, should I take on this one, that one? Like I could have been in a way better position now, but I'm happy with what I got. 150 apartments with the furniture, and it ended up being worthwhile for me. So okay, so at the same time, the landlords in my market, because of COVID, they weren't getting a lot of rental demand. So they were motivated to have me in their space because I started giving them money close to rent, like not exactly what rent was, but they wanted me in their unit. I was doing a good job. I was getting them money. And now I have furniture for almost free. I was moving this furniture into their units, which then allowed me to scale from 90 to, 200 plus, before we had to go back to like the rental arbitrage basis. So, I went from 180 back to 90, but quickly shot up back to like, 200 plus.
That is crazy that you're like, a lot of people I'm sure listening to this, and they're probably thinking like, yeah, if I came across an opportunity to get furniture at $200 per unit, that'd be cool, but I would have no idea where to put it, and they would probably just put it off. I might be one of those people, right? But you went into this mode of, I'm going to figure out how to literally create like a warehouse or a housing business for all of these pieces of furniture while I figure out where it's going to go. So can you just go a little bit deeper on like, once you had the furniture, once you figured all that out, how are you able to quickly get so many units from there? Was it just a bunch of units in one apartment complex, or were you going one landlord at a time? How did you end up scaling so quickly from there?
Yeah. So it was that landlord that I said I have 180 units with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I had 30 with him. So he has 5,000 units. The other guy had 1,000 units. Now he has 2,000, but this guy was even bigger than the other guy, right? So he has a vacancy at all times. So with that being said, I had the furniture, he had the product, and I said like, okay, this is going good for us. Allow me to get in some more units. So we slowly, increasingly added units in his building, and that's why we went from 30 to 180 with that furniture that I got from the bankruptcy. Wow. Yeah. So,
how many landlords in total of these 295 that you're at now?
Yeah. So majority of my portfolio is with that one guy with 180. Yep. So he has maybe like 50% more plus. And then maybe like 4 landlords cover like 85% of my units. And then I try to take some units with some random landlords to hope to increase their relationship over time. And sometimes it doesn't work out, where then I'm just like stuck with that lease and stuck with that relationship. And, I'll phase that out at some point, because my intention is to, get a little bit and then grow into something big. But if I'm not getting that, then it's like, okay, hey, I don't want to even answer a phone call from something that's happening at your place,
I need to just clarify this for everyone listening right now.
Yeah.
We have 53 right around there units and about 30 landlords, right?
How many?
About 30 landlords. And,
wow.
and you have, what is that? 6 times as many units as us, and about
what market are you in
of the landlords. So that's just crazy. Like the simplicity of that business. We're in Fresno, and near Yosemite and Bass Lake as well. So what I love about this model, Syed, is that you're going for the big dogs, right? Like we're typically dealing with the onesie twosies, the one person who just bought their first investment property, or, hey, I'm moving out of my house and now I want to Airbnb my house. And what you mentioned there, right? There's a lot of emotion that comes with that. And we have to really have the expectation set with this person. But the guy that you're talking about, the people that you're talking about, the landlords that have tons of units, there's not a lot of emotion there, I would imagine. It's just a lot of like, you pay me rent and we're good to go. Am I right?
Right. Correct. Well, a little more than that. It's they want to make sure I'm running a good operation. I'm bringing in good people into the units, because they have their core business and all the people within their buildings that I have to make sure I cater to. And then I have to work nicely with their maintenance guys and like the property managers to make sure that I'm not overburdening them with small issues that they complain back up to the big boss where he doesn't want to give me more units, So it's yes, it's paying them the rent, bringing in good people, working as a partnership with like the people in his company, and keeping other relationships, like letting them updating on what's going on in the world in my industry and business. Like with that
Sure.
landlord that I have 180 units with, I kind of like hanging out with him. Like we played pickleball together. He's an older guy, but I love hearing the conversations and how his mind works. And even when he has phone calls from other people, I love listening into them and seeing how they talk. So I do keep a good relationship with him, and the other landlords that I work with are colleagues with him too. So it's all like everybody knows each other, and I have a reputation. I'm hanging out with these guys, so it's like a good fit for everybody. A lot of these landlords in my market are from the Jewish community, so
Okay.
they own a lot of real estate, and they all know each other. They all even worked with each other 30 years ago, painting apartments. So it's pretty cool to see like where they are at.
So you got your foot in the door. You developed great relationships, and you've really fostered those great relationships even to this day. But going back to when you got your foot in the door, and I'm mainly asking this for a lot of people right now that are listening in, and they're like, "Man, I'm just trying to get my first deal, but I really like the sound of this. I'd rather have a bunch with one landlord than a bunch with a bunch of different landlords." What was the key, or maybe a few keys, to getting the attention of a big time real estate investor like that to get on their radar for them to eventually say yes?
So uh, I've gone through that whole process like all the beginners are going through. I paid my dues. I've gone
Mhm.
to a lot of different individuals, um, gone to any opportunity that came to me. So I did take on business for that. And I still recommend that, because you might not get what I got right away. It takes time. And it also takes, I don't know if you call it persistence or hard work, but it's like luck as well. I was at the right place at the right time, but you have to put yourself in those situations to get that luck, right? So I was lucky enough to go to a networking event to see a possible opportunity, and I was persistent on that after to try to get that deal to
Yeah.
happen, right? So almost, if you're starting off, you take what you could get, as long as it's you're making money, or even if you're not making money, like learn the experience, but get the reputation, take what you could get, make it happen, and then you could figure out where you want to go in your journey in this business. And I've gone through different paths and finally got to the path that I'm at right now.
Yeah. I think the key thing here, the takeaway for me at least, is in line with what I've thought about a lot of successful people that I meet. Most highly successful people that are doing big things are just willing to do the things that other people are not willing to do. And you did 6 months of follow-up. You probably at some point were a pest to these people, and a lot of
Oh yeah,
people would have been like, "Oh, I don't wanna,"
yeah,
worried about how they would be coming across. You were just like, "No, screw that. I've got an opportunity." During COVID, right? You just got in action. You did a lot of the things that people wouldn't be willing to do, and for that, you're being rewarded now. And that's, to me, you called it luck, but honestly, like, you create your own luck when you're working your
right.
butt off like you are. And for
Agree.
that, like, there's no wonder why you're at where you're at. Now, I do have one kind of wrap up question here, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, what does that team look like for almost 300 units? And how
Yeah.
much time are you putting in per week?
Okay, so I'll give you a breakdown on my team. 50%. Okay, so I have 100 resources, 100 people working in my company.
Wow.
50% of them are in the Philippines.
Okay.
So I started my business with using virtual assistants. I don't call them virtual assistants anymore. I call them my team. I call them my uh, leadership team. So I'm doing this one thing called EOS. I don't know if you heard of it. It's from
Yeah.
this book called
Traction.
Traction.
Yep.
Yeah, Traction. So I hired an implementer, and we have a leadership team out of Philippines. So we have our operations lead, we have our finance lead, we have our pricing and revenue management lead, we have our HR, we have IT, and we have like yeah, I can't even think of the other ones, marketing. So basically, I have a corporate structure based out of Philippines that handle all my back end work. So from an operation perspective, they're checking guests in, communicating with them, the check-in instructions. If there's any issues with the guests, they record it, send out a runner that I have local to me to fix their issue. They're scheduling the cleaners, purchasing supplies, all out of Philippines. From my finance perspective, my team is doing like the financial reporting and bookkeeping. They're doing all the accounts payables. They're doing all the forecasting and expense forecasting. They are reading my leases and contracts to making sure that they're all in line to what like we need to happen, and then they help me sign it.
Nice.
My pricing teams does all like the reporting. I have my pricing manager out of my local market, but I have the one that does the reporting for us on a daily basis to track how we're doing out in the Philippines, and she's doing the reporting for like the revenue and how we're tracking our RevPARs and ADRs and things like that. So basically 50 resources out of the Philippines, doing everything. And then I have 50 people here, but the 50 people here are all cleaners, runners, maintenance, handyman, and one like general manager that oversees like the local stuff going on. But like all the work is being done out of the Philippines.
Wow. Is your cleaning team in-house or is that a cleaning company?
So there are a lot of cleaning companies. So they're all contractors. So some of them are one-man teams, and then some of them are 5-people teams. And there's on my payroll, there's maybe like 25, 30 people I'm paying on a weekly basis. And then I don't even know how many people they're using to clean my units. So it's a lot of cleaning, a lot.
How much time are you putting in per week right now?
Yeah, so I like to say that I really like my lifestyle. I don't put a lot of hours in hard work, but I take on all the stress of the business.
Sure.
So I'm always thinking, even if I'm doing something, even if I'm at the gym, even if I'm driving somewhere, um, it's not like computer work, it's not like physical work, but you still get tired at the end of the day because you're thinking about the next move or like the next big thing that's going to go wrong and how to solve it. Or I need to make a decision in 3 days about this thing. Let me think through all the possibilities.
Yeah.
So really, like, I have a nice lifestyle and freedom to do what I want when I want. My biggest thing is on a weekly basis, I have my leadership meeting. So that's like a hour and a half meeting of I'm making decisions like on the spot of like all the questions that everyone has throughout the week. I'm making on the spot, and that to me, I get exhausted as if I work like a 12-hour shift in that 1 hour, hour and a half. So it's that, and then I handle some from the screening team, like some of like the questionable reservations that I get, and then building the relationship with landlords for new business. So that's kind of what I spend my time on. But I do, and then red flags of like the BS that happens in the business and the problems, like a fire or a lawsuit or landlord wanting to terminate leases early, like things like that, and having to like resolve those things. Obviously, I have to get involved. So that's kind of like my thing. But like during the day, I get to go to the gym, or I go anywhere I want and spend time with my kids and family. Mostly, it's more like stay-at-home dad for that. But the stress and burden is behind me. Like sometimes I get overwhelmed when I'm not doing much either. So it takes a toll on you. Yeah. So.
Well, since you brought it up, just one last and maybe a little bit of a deeper question here, because I feel you on that, right? Whether someone's listening in and they've got 10 properties or 100 properties, when you start bringing people in to take the day-to-day stuff off of your plate, doesn't mean that you've stopped working. I might, just like you, only have a leadership meeting and maybe encounter a couple issues during the week, but it's always on your mind. You're always worrying. You're always thinking about it. How do you deal with that stress? Do you have any routines? Do you have any stress relievers? Do you have any like me time things? What does that look like to help you get out of that mindset of worrying and always thinking and be a little bit more present too?
Yeah, so like I think sometimes you're just like even born with it. Like you can handle large amounts of stress without having it take a toll on you. But I spend a lot of time at my gym. It might not look like it, but I go to the gym a lot. I'm like, working out. My wife says, "Are you working out your thumbs? Are you working out like your actual muscles?" Because I'm always at the gym on my phone, like in between sets. And then, I play pickleball, I play basketball, and when you're doing that, like nothing that's going on in the world, like it's like even in your mind, like it just like clears your mind from everything, and that's you're just at the present. Nobody cares about what's going on in your life. You're in the zone, you're in the game. Another thing is like my kids distract me like no other. Like I come home and I have a landlord like saying that I'm gonna sue you, and then I have to change like 2 diapers, and like it's like okay, you can't like keep that like burden on your shoulders when you're around your kids. They don't care, so they almost distract me from all like the craziness in the world.
I love
So
it.
yeah, so those are my biggest things. Like the gym helps me relieve a lot of stress, helps me feel better. I like going there. I love like talking to the people at the gym. It's like my like community now. Like I used to like have a lot of friends, and now it's like it's hard to like hang out with friends a lot because of like family. But now it's like the gym is where I get my social life over there.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, this has been a really powerful and fun story, and just all the success I'm sure is going to be very inspiring for a lot of people that are listening in. But where can people continue to get your content and follow you and stay connected with you?
Yeah, so recently I started getting involved in posting a lot of content on social media. So on my Instagram, Syed BNB. I like spelled it wrong on this podcast, but it's Syed SYED BNB, like Airbnb. And basically, I talk about my daily life, life of an Airbnb entrepreneur, and that's where you could, see my story and see what I'm doing, problems I'm dealing with on a daily basis, and you guys can, contact me over there.
Awesome. Syed, is there any last words of wisdom or encouragement that you have for our audience before we log off?
So my thing is take action. This business is a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
You could simply, help somebody else out with their property. So it's not a huge capital investment. So don't spend a lot of time just like staying behind the scenes and like seeing other people do it, or just like getting into that analysis paralysis method. It's good to learn, but it's even better to take action. So take action in this business, see how it goes, see if you like it. And if you don't like it, you could move on. But if you do like it, it could bring you some of the greatest opportunities that you could even ever imagine.
Good stuff, man. Syed Lateef, thank you so much for jumping on here to conquer the world of short-term rentals, and congrats on all of your success. For those of you that are listening on recording, we'll see you next time. But for those of you that are in the six-figure formula group here live, we're going to keep it here to answer all of your questions while we still have Syed for the next couple minutes. Thank you, Syed. As he said, go check him out, Syed BNB, and that's where you can follow Syed and his journey as he continues to conquer the world. Like literally, this guy, I wouldn't be surprised if he's at 500, 600 units in just a year from now. The amount of relationships that he has to be able to blow this up, and all of the team, 100 people on his team, that's crazy. I mean, 50 VAs, I just can't even imagine all of the things that he's doing on a daily basis to make sure that the quality control of this business is going where it needs to go. But very cool story. I hope you enjoyed it here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll see you next time.